Hello once again, everybody. Wanted to take this opportunity to discuss a topic that has increasingly become more prevalent, and it's this notion of a movie or a book or a comic being, well, any form of media really, being good enough, or people needing to somehow lower their expectations. What I mean by that is I see a lot of people who will see a particular piece of media, whether it's a book, a film, what have you, and they will say that, oh, it was great for what it was, and that you really can't expect too much out of it, and that you should be grateful that it even happened, that not supporting it will make sure that it never happens again, so on and so forth, and that people really need to stop. See, this is another thing that's come up. People need to stop letting critics think for them. Now, there's a problem with this. First and foremost, the sheer unmitigated arrogance of believing that because you sat there and liked something that critics didn't like, it means that critics are forever completely, totally, and utterly useless, and that anyone who happens to agree with them does not do so because they saw it and made an informed decision, does not do so because it genuinely looks bad to them and that's why they have no interest in seeing it, but did so purely because a critic told them what to think, and if they were a free-thinking individual, they would agree 100% with you. That is an incredibly stupid, arrogant, and foolish sentiment. I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. But the concept of not expecting more from something, the concept of settling for something, is something I want to touch on, specifically as it applies to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, the current ones, the past ones, etc. Now, here's the thing. When it came to the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, people loved it. It had something for the older folks, it had something for the younger folks, it was a lot of fun and yet also serious. You know, they managed to have fun while making a pretty serious and grounded film. Very similar to the comic books themselves. And, they also managed to incorporate some elements from the TV series that would be familiar to young kids. For example, April being a news reporter instead of an assistant for Baxter, which actually works in this movie because, well, Baxter Stockman was nowhere to be found. So it's, it's one of those things that's kind of acceptable. It's something that's pulled from, some sort of Ninja Turtles lore. You had, the multicolored headbands, which were very useful in helping to tell them apart, especially since, you couldn't make super unique, body types and everything in those suits. They could only make what they could make. But Jim Henson did an amazing job with those suits. The love of pizza was something that was introduced in the cartoon, but for the most part, by and large, it was trying to pull from the Mirage comic series, and it did so pretty well. It was a bit more serious. It was a bit more violent, in a sense. The comedy therein was far more situational and character based than, just goofy antics or any kind of slapstick humor. And that's something that changed over time, which is something we're going to get into. But when you compare it to, the sequel, yeah, it was a lot darker, it was more violent and everything, but it was beloved even by people who liked the cartoons, because, if it was cool, it was amazing. It was a darn good movie, especially for its time. The effects were just way ahead of their time in terms of the suits and whatnot. Then came the sequel. And the sequel, I will admit, was significantly toned down in terms of violence. Definitely made to be more kid-friendly. A lot of it was due to toy companies who they had previously been trying to line up deals with, seeing the movie and refusing to make toys of it because it was too violent. I kid you not. which is why Raph and Leo never actually used their sai or swords in the sequel. In fact, I believe that the weapons are sheathed at all times. Which is a problem the cartoon ran into as well, which is part of why they eventually decided that the foot soldiers were in fact robots. So when they sliced them, they blew up. You know, not necessarily something you could deal with in a movie, but hey, what are you gonna do? So that was that. You know, it was a bit more goofy. I mean, they had the ninja rap sequence and everything. By the time the third film rolled around, they were willing to let them use their weapons again. Standards had changed a little bit, but they once again upped the comedy, and they went for like pratfalls and slapstick humor. And Corey Feldman was back as Donatello, which honestly, I do gotta say, of all the people who voiced Donatello in the movies, I actually preferred the guy in Secret of the Ooze. I don't know why. I just thought he was a better fit. I mean, Corey Feldman as a brain. But, I mean, it's the downside of being a character actor. You kind of get pigeonholed into certain roles, and when you try to see him as something else, sometimes it doesn't work. But when it came to part 3, you know, he was back. The jokes were there more. The violence was still kind of toned down, but at least they were able to pull out their weapons and use them in this context. But overall, was it a strong film? Not really. It was kind of stupid fun at best. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I see a lot of people act like it was horrible, and contextually, compared to the first film, and even the second, yeah, it's easily the weakest of the trilogy. I am more than willing to admit that. I know a lot of people think that it was like pure cancer. I don't fully agree, but that's neither here nor there. But see, then when the standard slipped, people didn't settle, and that movie kind of bombed. And that's how the Four Turtles movie didn't happen. Thank God, because it sounded horrible. I mean, some of what they were going to use was actually okay in, you know, theory. It's just the way they were putting it into practice didn't work, and then they used it in other media and used it better than that movie would have, at least based on the current inception of it, before it was, you know, yanked. But, you know, that's how the cookie crumbles. Now, when it comes to the new films, the new one comes out, and frankly, is far worse than even part 3. You know, the turtles are now almost 7 feet tall. They have super strength. They're bulletproof. The foot soldiers are now actual soldiers and not ninja. It's like they took the term soldier too literally. You know, they're pulling out guns. They're like sort of like a paramilitary urban terrorist group. I can't really explain it any other way. And with something like that, you know, and especially since a lot of their exploits, as it were, are somewhat public, you'd think, you know, the National Guard would be in on this, the military would be in on this, because this is a pretty serious deal. See, I mean, in the original Ninja Turtles stuff, you know, the Foot Ninja, the reason that nobody could really pinpoint them, and a lot of people didn't even necessarily think they existed, because they operated exclusively from the shadows, you know, ninja. It was on par with like the Illuminati or some secret society where if you talked about it, people thought you were crazy. But it, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's the route we're gonna go. I mean, and then when it came to like the characterization, the personalities were all far more generic. The everything about them was just more generic. The way they operated. Master Splinter was kind of half psychotic. I mean, I don't know. I do not, for the life of me, understand what they were going for there. The way he half beat them when they got back into the lair, for example, that was like that was not Splinter. I'm sorry, but it's stuff like that where, I mean, and then you have Megan Fox as April O'Neil, and she just phoned in that performance so bad. She does every performance, but that one was like especially bad. And then you have oh god, Will Arnett was just like wasted. You had William Fichtner was also wasted, and it's just like those two, are capable of something good, but they're in this movie. And I mean, they tried to play down the whole, Eric Sachs is actually a westernization of Oroku Saki. I mean, you can even see it when you look at the two names and when you say them out loud. Eric Sachs, Oroku Saki. You could see where they got that from. And they tried to mask that then by real quick filming a Japanese guy in the shadows, completely isolated from everything else, never interacting with the world around him. And the Shredder dialogue sounds nothing like what that guy would say, and sounds almost exactly like stuff Sachs says. When they get back after kidnapping the three of the four turtles, he's got the Under Armour on, and it's like, oh yeah, you look like you just stepped out of that giant robot suit. And conveniently, when that robot suit shows up again, you're out of the scene. Oh, what a shock. There were really, really big plot holes. Right down to, we see April's dad, set that lab on fire and basically get trapped, and he dies in that fire. But then, no, Sachs says, hey, guess what? I shot your dad. It's like, there was never a mystery of how her dad died, though. We saw how he died. She remembered how he died. But no, apparently, Eric Sachs somehow walked into a burning laboratory that guy couldn't get out of, pulled a gun, shot him, and got out? I don't know. But it was a mess. It was a mess of a movie. Big old mess of a movie. That and their final fight happening out in the daylight, in public, very visible. Somehow nobody notices it. They even, ride that antenna down, and somehow all the people staring don't see them, and then they get down in the manhole, which is about half the diameter of their shells, so how in the hell they got down there, I don't know. But it is what it is. Now, you couple that with this new movie here. This new movie coming out. To be fair, there are some things about it that do sound like they at least tried to improve them. The turtles are noticeably smaller. Now, that's a problem. That is actually a problem. Because they were huge and now they're small. Part of me wishes they had at least been smart about it. Like, maybe exposure to that ooze somehow shrank them, gave them a less monstrous appearance. It actually could have been a nice out for some of the complaints people had. But no, they're just smaller now just because. It's like a lazy change, and they just expect you to not notice or care. Stephen Amell playing Casey Jones. Casey's a cop in this movie. Casey, street vigilante Jones, is a cop. Well, at least a corrections officer. He's apparently the one driving the Shredder to prison when he's busted out. And the reason that he's helping them is because he's trying to bring him back in. Because, that's totally Casey Jones, dressed like, he lives in the suburbs, all nice with his clean hoodie and nice, short-cut hair and mask that's actually a frigging helmet. But anyway, that's totally Casey Jones, right? Right. Baxter Stockman is Sherman Klump now, like, literally. Just not near as ridiculously fat. I mean like Eddie Murphy Sherman Klump here, the way he acts. The Shredder is mysteriously young, has no massive facial scarring anymore like the dude in the shadows did. Karai is a completely different person and also younger, and does nothing. Bebop and Rocksteady, they gave Rocksteady human lips. I know that's kind of nitpicking, but it just looks wrong. But Bebop and Rocksteady are like really hard to screw up. So, Krang, as I understand it, they're very much going for cartoon Krang, which is a massive disappointment. Because I've seen versions of him that are like so much more intimidating and, actually make him a deadly foe and a competent leader, which is why his army is kind of deadly. But that's, none of that's in this movie. None of that's in this movie. It's just, Krang apparently delivers this monologue to the Shredder, And because he's trying to get in his new body, but he can't fit because he's a little too fat, he has the body punch himself in the face, so he pops in there. I mean, that's the kind of humor we're going for here. Again. You know, I mean, no boner jokes this time, apparently, thank God. But we did compensate for that by having Megan Fox go from a quote-unquote sexy nerd outfit to turning it into a sexy schoolgirl outfit, complete with slow-mo and long pan over her body, and then she really does nothing else for most of the movie, apparently, except half-ass flirt with Casey Jones. I don't know how to feel about that. I do know how to feel about that, I just don't have time to go into it. But my point is, I mean, this movie, while maybe better than the first in some ways and arguably worse in others, it doesn't feel like, you know, a good movie. It doesn't feel like the Ninja Turtles to me at all. It just doesn't. It does not feel like the Ninja Turtles does not look like a good film. Now, the thing that gets me is that the best defense people can offer for this film, and I'm talking people who have seen it, is not that it's a genuinely good movie. It's that it's a nostalgia trip. Because you'll see all this stuff that you recognize from the original cartoon, and the original cartoon isn't even the original source material, but I digress. You know, you'll see all this stuff that was originally in the Ninja Turtles. No, it wasn't. You know, oh, Stephen Amell was great as Casey, except for all the people who say he was wooden as Casey, and that's really not Casey, but I digress. You know, why was he great as Casey? Oh, because it was Casey again, and it's like, okay. I don't get that, and a lot of people, when they watch that movie, they're not seeing Casey Jones, they're actually seeing, you know, Oliver Queen. That I know it's a lot of it has to do with Stephen Amell, but it's like even the way he looks. You know, they didn't bother to give his character a unique look. It looks like he literally just walked over from the set of Arrow and started filming. But it's like I'm reading these comments and they all have one thing in common. It's a nostalgia trip, so therefore it's good. And number two, I don't know why people expect Oscar quality from these movies. It's like this in Transformers, people always expect some kind of Oscar quality. They're just good popcorn flicks, and really you shouldn't expect more than that from these franchises. I mean, they're ludicrous. Giant turtles taking martial arts lessons from a rat, transforming robots, come on. It's like, okay, first of all, expecting better, especially when better with these characters and this franchise already exists, is not remotely unrealistic. It's not remotely wrong to want. I want a movie that is at least on par with the original 1990 Ninja Turtles film, and this is not that. Okay, I have a right to expect that because that standard exists. I have a right to expect good storytelling. I mean, there are so many other media out there of the Ninja Turtles that have done some great storytelling. The Mirage comic, you know, I mean, it had its moments where it could be kind of ludicrous, but, you know, comics can. But it had a great story about these four brothers and what they went through and, you know, avenging their honor, the Shredder's return, a life or death battle that got them almost all killed. It was amazing. And then you had the 2012 TV series, which, you know, it was a kid series, and miraculously, somehow, despite being made by 4 kids, turned out to be really good, at least until the 2 spin-off series. It was, it adapted the comics extraordinarily well, too. Especially with, like, the first season. Like, oh my gosh, the way they fought Shredder, and it seemed like Shredder, you know, died, although they did kind of take a little more from the movie with that one than they did from the comics, the original movie. And then, Shredder's return, and they finally see when the Shredder came back is when one of the turtles got like brutally beaten, and they had to go up north to hide for a while, and that was originally Leonardo. The movie changed it to Raphael for some reason, but in the movie, or in the comic, it was always Leonardo, and it was in the TV series too. I mean, there was just so much cool stuff, and the Utram Shredder being healed by those worm-looking things is actually reminiscent to how the Shredder was resurrected in the comics. Leonardo and Shredder facing off up on the roof of the building, just really really good. And then you have the IDW Turtles that are going on right now, and that is honestly one of the best ongoing comics out there right now, if not possibly the best. I mean, IDW, what they've done with the Ninja Turtles and the Transformers too. Oh my God, they have elevated both of those franchises. They raised that bar. That is incredible. Full stop. And the way they've explored the depths of the lore of both series, the way they've expanded it, is incredible. And when people say, "Oh, you got no right to expect that from these," yes, I do. Yes, we all do, because it's out there. It's not something that doesn't exist. People aren't sitting there and saying, "Oh, I want to see this win in the war." No, because on its face, people don't expect it to. Even if it was amazing and great, comic book movies don't really win Oscars. They don't. It's a bias in some cases because I've seen some incredible performances in those, and the sole exception has been Heath Ledger, and that a good chunk of that is because it was a posthumous award. That's not to downplay his performance; it was great, and he did deserve it. But really, one of the only reason the Academy caved on that really was because of that. They'll give them effects awards and stuff, sure, but anything like acting, best picture, direction, writing, screenplay, whatever, no, they won't give that. But yeah, I don't expect it to win awards. I expect it to be good. That's the long and short of it. People expect it to be good. That's the long and short of it. People expecting it to be good, people expecting them to put effort into it, people expecting them to care is not them expecting Oscar quality. It is not them expecting too much from these franchises. And this concept that somehow these are so ludicrous that you can't expect that, I mean, really? Okay, let's take a look at that. Giant transforming robots. Okay. Giant transforming alien robots from another planet, Civil War, other planets dragged into it. 4 mutant turtles exposed to this stuff, being turned into anthropomorphic turtles, being taught by a rat sensei who remembered seeing everything that his previous owner had done and is now capable of mimicking it. Okay, that seems silly. Yeah, you know what else seems silly? A teenager who's constantly bullied by everybody, apparently, goes to a science exhibit one day and is bitten by a radioactive spider and can climb walls and swing through the air and becomes a superhero at age 15. A scrawny teenager who couldn't possibly make the cut for the military being injected with a serum and blasted with some Vita rays, becoming the peak, the pinnacle of human perfection and a super soldier. A billionaire orphan rather, who channeling his grief into dressing up like a bat and going out and fighting crime with his chief enemy being a clown. I mean, are you seeing what I'm going for here? All these things, Batman, Captain America, Spider-Man, Superman, Thor, the Iron Man, the list goes on. All absurd concepts on the base level. it's how they're handled that made them beloved. It's how they were presented, how the characters behaved, what they were able to do. That was amazing. It's the same thing with these two franchises. Yet for some reason, I keep hearing the same old argument that somehow these weren't that great to begin with, or didn't have that much prestige, or haven't had, good storytelling ever. In fact, Dorkly even dedicated an entire article claiming that literally everything that was related to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has wound up sucking somehow. They skipped the IDW comic conveniently, but they ran the article, even claiming that the Mirage comic somehow sucked because of what Image did, even though the Image comic is isolated in and of itself, and the Mirage continuity wound up ignoring it. But even then, people, the way they presented it wasn't even as bad. It wasn't even, it wasn't as bad as how they presented it to be. I hate the Image volume, okay? I really don't like it. I thought they tried way too hard to be edgy, but they did have some interesting ideas, and they were better executed than that article made it seem. But see, and same with the 2012 cartoon. Apparently, because the Back to the Sewers series was a thing, that means that the 2012 series somehow sucks, even though you literally do not have to watch that or fast forward to watch the 2012 series. You can watch that in isolation, and it's good on its own, but because of those, apparently it sucked. I mean, there is like some kind of weird reach to prove that the Ninja Turtles have always on some level sucked and been incredibly stupid, and therefore you can't expect better from this movie. I mean, they even trashed Jim Henson's suit design, for crying out loud. Called it wrong and creepy and just, oh my god, it was insulting. I mean, those suits were amazing for their time. Even by today's standards, they're amazing. The level of puppeteering they can do. But it's just one of those things where, with anything really, saying that expecting standards, expecting quality of any kind is unrealistic, that's bogus. And that's bullcrap. And if that is your sole defense for something, then I think it's high time you took a good long look and admitted that that thing kind of sucks, doesn't it? At any rate, I will catch all you guys later then. Peace.